Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to rise today and to talk about the enhancements to the Canada Pension Plan found in Bill C-26. But, Mr. Speaker, if you'll indulge me, I want to take a few moments to just talk procedurally about what's going on here today. My friend opposite had some concerns, I think, but let's make sure we get some facts here, Mr. Speaker. Today would have been the 6th day of debate on Bill C-26, a bill that will help Canadians achieve a secure, safe, and dignified retirement. The Conservative Party had requested more time for debate on this bill. They could have debated the bill today as scheduled. Instead, they resorted to procedural tactics to obstruct debate and attempt to shut down the House of Commons and go home. Disappointingly, it has become abundantly clear, Mr. Speaker, that the Conservatives would rather focus on these types of tactics rather than substantive debate on this important issue. This kind of behaviour is exactly what Canadians rejected when they voted for real change a year ago. As a result, Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives left us with few options on how to proceed with this bill. We have an obligation to ensure that this legislation is sent to committee for further study, and we will do what it takes to ensure that this occurs, Mr. Speaker. So it's a pleasure, Mr. Speaker, to speak today about the enhancements to Bill C-26, the enhancements to the CPP found in Bill C-26. A moment, Mr. Speaker. Today, Mr. Speaker, middle-class Canadians are working harder than ever, but many are worried that they won't have enough money for their retirement. Chaque année, des mois et
Every year, fewer and fewer Canadians are part of a private pension plan.
To address this, Mr. Speaker, we made a commitment to Canadians to strengthen the Canada Pension Plan in order to help them achieve their goal of a strong, secure, and stable retirement. Earlier this year, Canada's finance ministers reached an historic agreement to make meaningful changes to the CPP, an example of federalism at its best. The more than 1/4 of Canadian families nearing retirement, 1.1 million families, Mr. Speaker, who are facing a drop in their standard of living will be able to retire in dignity as a result of this enhancement. The deal will boost how much each Canadian will get from their pension, from 1/4 of their earnings now to fully 1/3. And to make sure these changes are affordable, we will phase them in slowly over 7 years, from 2019 to 2025, so that the impact is small and gradual. Every Canadian, Mr. Speaker, deserves a secure and dignified retirement after a lifetime of hard work. Through these enhancements, we have taken a powerful step to help make that happen. Mr. Speaker, I think it's worthwhile to look back at the CPP and its history. The CPP was first established by the Liberal government of Lester B. Peterson in 1965, a minority government, actually, Mr. Speaker. And at its creation, there were 6.5 workers for every retiree. By the 1990s, Mr. Speaker, projections indicated that there would only be 2 workers per retiree very soon. By 1996, for these demographic reasons, the CPP payouts were higher than the contributions coming in. Obviously not a sustainable model, Mr. Speaker, and change was required. In 1997, Canadian governments acted to address these demographic changes and created the CPP Investment Board, the CPPIB. Responsible governments, Mr. Speaker, react to the realities and challenges of the day. Earlier this year, agreement was reached between 8 provincial governments and the federal government to enhance the Canada Pension Plan. The result of that agreement is what is before us in this bill. Mr. Speaker, changing demographics is not the only factor that necessitated these enhancements. However, the greatest factor is the effective disappearance of company pension plans. There was a time when nearly half of Canadians could look forward to a regular monthly retirement for a defined amount fully supported by their employer. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, these defined benefit pension plans are rapidly becoming a thing of the past. According to Statistics Canada, back in 1971, around 48% of people were covered by defined benefit plans. By 2011, that number had fallen to nearly half that rate. These enhancements are designed to address the disappearance of corporate pensions. An aging population, coupled with the evaporation of company pensions, makes enhancements vitally important at this time, Mr. Speaker. Quite frankly, Canada and Canada's economy cannot afford to not make these changes. Importantly, these changes will proceed at a gradual, reasonable pace, beginning in 2019 and taking 7 years to complete. Additionally, tax breaks will help employees absorb these adjusted pension contribution rates. All Canadians, Mr. Speaker, deserve a strong, secure, and stable retirement. I think all members can agree on this. The new measures, importantly, Mr. Speaker, will help young Canadians today who, like all Canadians, hope to retire with dignity, hope to retire with money to live on, hope to retire in a stable economic environment, Mr. Speaker. And it's these young Canadians, I think, that we must not lose sight of when we consider and debate this bill. This bill will have long-reaching effects into the midterm and long term. It's important, Mr. Speaker, not just from a social perspective, which it certainly is, to make sure Canadians have a dignified, secure, and stable retirement. But, Mr. Speaker, it's equally important from an economic standpoint. Canadians are living longer. There's no doubt about this, Mr. Speaker. Canadians are going to live in their retirement years longer. This trend will continue, Mr. Speaker. To keep Canada's economy economically sound and viable and strong, we need people that have money to afford retirement. People with money, Mr. Speaker, of course, buy things. This consumption is what drives economic growth. As our population ages, if there was a corresponding decrease in the amount of income that they had, thereby resulting in a corresponding decrease in the amount of disposable income, our economy, Mr. Speaker, would screech to a halt. We can't let this happen. Responsible governments ought not to let this happen. We need to ensure, Mr. Speaker, that our economy remains viable well into the future. Of course, the CPP is a well-managed, professionally run investment board. The contributions, any payouts, Mr. Speaker, have to be met with contributions. This is a reasonable amount of contribution that will result in payouts to Canadians. The CPP will be around for generations to come. If we don't act now, Mr. Speaker, that reality will deteriorate. People will be living on less and less money as they retire, Mr. Speaker. We need to increase the retirement income of Canadians to make sure they have a secure retirement, to make sure they can pay their bills, but also, Mr. Speaker, to make sure they can enjoy the retirement they've earned after a life of hard work, after a lifetime of contributing to the great Canadian economy, after a lifetime, Mr. Speaker, of raising children, Mr. Speaker, of working hard, of perhaps putting their kids through school or paying for trade skill training, Mr. Speaker. A lifetime of growing our great country. We look, Mr. Speaker, at the CPP and we think of retired people, of course. But I want us to take a step back, Mr. Speaker, and also think of the young people that this will definitely help well into the future. Maybe some of us in this very chamber, maybe our children. We need to make sure Canada and Canadians will be able to retire in dignity, not only today, not only tomorrow, but well into the future, Mr. Speaker. And I can think of no better way to make sure that happens than these enhancements found in Bill C-26, and I urge all of my colleagues, for those social reasons and for the economic reasons, to support these changes to the CPP. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Good. Questions and comments?